Are you tired of the cookie-cutter approach to education that's stuck in the last century? Are you seeking a win-win situation where your family thrives, your kid's education is revolutionary, and you still get to chase your own dreams? Welcome to Unschooled Unleashed. Unlock your child's genius. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, an unapologetic rebel dad and promoter of what many consider to be educational anarchy. You know the world isn't going to be won by those that just toe the line. It's the innovators, the visionaries, and the resilient spirits that are going to thrive. Our mission here is to forge those world changers within our very homes with less stress, energy, and time. Unschooled Unleashed starts now. Welcome back to another fantastic episode of Unschooled Unleashed. I'm your host, Matthew Jarecki, and today we're going to talk about flexibility in learning. I'm going to make a good argument, I think, as to why keeping flexibility in education is very, 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 very important for our children. I think it's one of the key factors as to why we unschool in our family. I think that this is a meta skill that transfers across different parts of life, so I think it's very important to learn. And hopefully I make a great argument as to why that might be the case, and especially against a rigid curriculum that is testing and having deadlines and all that fun stuff. So, little update on our family. We are still building our box truck. It is moving at a snail's pace, but we are able to get that back door / patio to open and shut, which has been a big barrier for us. We completely made a custom design, which took a long time to actually make, but we're starting to move on to the side door. Just purchased that yesterday, at least a new one, because the other one turns out doesn't work. So a little bit of a waste of money, but I got another one coming, so that one hopefully works. And we're just going to start doing the rest of the outside stuff, so that way we can hatch it down if it and be able to work on the inside, not dependent on the weather. So all good stuff. I'm scraping my house right now because I'm going to paint it. I got a quote from a local painter, and it was just too much money. When I looked at the hours that it would take, it makes a lot of sense for me just to knock it out on my own, especially since I can do some stuff along with my scraping and painting of the house. So that's where my time's gone. That and a couple other home projects while it starts to turn into fall. I am looking forward to fall. Me and my friend are going to tailgate tomorrow at a Cleveland Browns game. So we're going to have a lot of fun. If you haven't been to a Cleveland tailgate party, then you probably don't know what tailgating is, with few exceptions. I think Cleveland does it right. Down in the municipal lot, we call it the Muni Lot. So if you're in town, head down there. You'll meet a lot of friendly people. It's a lot of fun. So anyways, that's kind of what's going on in our lives right now. So with that, let's dive in. Today we're going to talk about flexibility in education. I think this is a game changer. I think it's going to help my children develop real-world skills, creativity, resilience, and all the while keeping their love for learning. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're able to move at our children's pace. They don't necessarily lose interest in something as quick because you're not forcing them to do something. It's the anti-curriculum, flexibility in education. In fact, I would say that flexibility in your child's education is pretty much why a lot of people do unschooling. And the method would be interest-based learning and child-driven learning. So let's dive into a couple things I want to talk about as far as flexibility in education. First, let's talk about why traditional, rigid, curriculum-based education often fails. And when I talk about curriculum, what I'm talking about here is specifically a forced curriculum. have no problems with curriculum. In fact, I think curriculum can be a very, very good thing because it exposes you to all these different, all this information in maybe a logical way or a some kind of structured way, right? However, when we go over and say our primary goal is to adhere to a timeline, well, don't be surprised if the education doesn't work for your child, because education isn't a one-size-fits-all. Every child learns differently, and all the rigid systems out there treat them the same. An example would be one child excels at math, but another child struggles with reading, and another is hands-on but dislikes sitting still. These are all attributes of a child. And when every child learns differently, they're not going to be able to pick up on it at the same, say, pace or even have the same retention. Now, we should try and encourage to get good at learning always, but we really do have to focus on the main ways someone learns. Let's not try and change their hard wiring. We want to encourage them to, of course, get that information, but also be able to do it in multiple ways. But again, it's not a one-size-fits-all. And if we're just doing one way of teaching, like say in a classroom, well, that's not going to work for a lot of kids. Boredom is what happens for kids who are ahead. And this is another reason why rigid education often fails. Advanced learners are forced to slow down, and this kills their motivation. While, let me say a personal story. My son was way ahead in math, but the curriculum, following a curriculum would have certainly slowed him down. In fact, we got one of those Brain Quest books, and we flew through before he got it for Christmas. He didn't use it. He kind of tabled it. And when he went to finally do his Brain Quest book, he found that we had already exposed him, not done a lot of work, but already exposed him to a lot of the concepts. So what he did is he just did a couple questions here, a couple questions there, bounced around, and he was able to get it right. If I were to make him do one chapter, then the next, then the next, then the next, and slow him down, he's already got the concepts. Some practice would arguably be pretty good. That's one of the reasons we got the Brain Quest book, because I think they do a pretty good job in giving, problems that they would enjoy. But no way. I don't want to slow him down. I don't want to have him do all the chapters just to do all the chapters. Nope. He would get bored, and that would kill all his motivation. Then he wouldn't be interested, and then math is a bad thing. Not good. Another reason why rigid education often fails, the traditional way we do it, is when we do this rigid curriculum, trying to adhere to this timeline of forced curriculum, it causes stress for kids who fall behind. This was me. Actually, both these were me because it was different areas, but this one in particular made a very big impression. Kids who struggle feel constantly pressured, which impacts their self-esteem. And my personal story, I've mentioned it multiple times, but it's one of the big reasons why I educate my kids this way, is in 4th grade, I got sick with the flu, missed a week of school, and it happened to be introduction to fractions. Then they just handed me what seemed like a novel of homework to catch up on and just said, good luck. I thought everyone else seemed to get it. I thought there was something wrong. It impacted my self-esteem. I thought I was bad at math. This isn't true at all. In fact, I found out later in life I was very good at math, and it's just mind-blowing stuff for me as an adult to find out that I'm good at math when all this time I'd been avoiding it. This is what the rigid curriculum did to me. I was a casualty. We can argue that, you can make a great argument that a rigid curriculum can have benefits, right? Because it certainly does. That's one of the reasons why we try and do it. But it certainly doesn't put the child's learning first. It actually puts the timeline first. And if I'm choosing between A and B, and those are the only things that I know about this choice, is I either have my child actually learn something, or I follow a timeline. I'm choosing they learn something. That's one of the reasons I'm an unschooler. And there's other benefits to unschooling, but that's that. And it is in the morning, and I'm drinking my coffee, so you're going to enjoy a coffee with me. Oh, but it's hot. Goodness. Maybe I won't take too many sips. Can't stand when I burn my tongue and then I can't taste anything the rest of the day. All right. Moving on. Let's talk about how flexibility encourages deeper, more meaningful learning. So first, self-paced learning leads to mastery. When you're able, let me back up. Children aren't rushing to meet deadlines because you're flexible. They're mastering what truly interests them, what they truly feel called to do, what they're gifted at. They're diving headfirst into it. It's the secret sauce in unschooling. For example, my children, they enjoy stuff about World War II. We did a deep dive into documentaries, books, talking about it. We even want to go travel and see some of this stuff. But we wouldn't have been able to do any of this if we had a rigid curriculum. We did it on their timeline, and they stayed interested, and they're still, they still remember a lot of that stuff, at least the major points, and they even know the names. I mean, you'd be really impressed if you talked to them about World War II. At least I am, but I'm their dad. So another reason that flexibility encourages a deeper and more meaningful learning is they get to have exploration of multiple interests. Where just like adults have multiple interests, so do kids. Flexibility allows kids to connect ideas across subjects, which lead to richer learning experience. So when they're able to kind of jump here, jump there, of course not constantly jumping back and forth, but you get into something and then you might in the evening read something else and you make some connections. That is awesome. That is so some of those, at least from my experience, when I decided when I was in college and tried to enjoy learning, one of the cool things was, and this is the first time I ever took learning seriously, was in college. Not even my first year, but maybe more my second or third, which is awful. Either way, I started to take it seriously, and I started seeing connections between classes. I'm like, oh man, this is interesting, and I started to dive into some of my own stuff. One of the reasons I enjoyed college is because I could choose what I want to learn. I get to build my own curriculum. I could choose my time. I enjoyed that. I thought that was awesome. But I was able to do a deep dive into certain things. Now, of course, it's all top-down instruction, even with college. However, I signed up for it, and it was appropriate. I wanted to be done by the deadline. But I needed to also make sure I understood this stuff. And I made that my primary goal, is to deeply understand whatever I was learning, not make it through the test. So I would read, I would do about 3 times more work than it seemed everyone else did, because they would just focus on the notes and all this stuff. And I would dive into the topic because I really enjoyed exposure to these ideas and whatever I was learning about, and make those connections. And I really tried to focus on mastery, even though I had deadlines. And I think that was really good for me. But I did that at the same time with multiple interests. And I think that children don't just have one interest. Now, you could get hyper-focused. I remember being hyper-focused as a kid. Totally fine. But they're going to still have more than one interest. Eventually something the sun sets on one thing and then rises on another, and sometimes there's some overlap. So I also believe that, is another, bullet point under the heading of flexibility encourages deeper, more meaningful learning. Freedom to fail and learn from mistakes is another huge advantage when we're talking about remaining flexible like we do in unschooling. And you could do this with your home education however you do it. I think you kind of have to if you're a sane person. But learning from mistakes, learning failure is okay, I think is a great, great, great lesson that is completely missed when you follow a rigid curriculum. Remember, when you're testing kids, when you're telling them they have to learn it by a certain time, when all these things give all this pressure, and then when they don't do well, it's fear. Oh, you got a bad grade. Let's set aside all the self-esteem stuff that could turn into, and let's just focus on the real world. In the real world, you're supposed to go out there and try something. If it doesn't work, adjust, try again. That is a huge skill to prepare you for the real world that most of us are deprived of because we went to traditional schooling. It's very rare to be allowed to fail, or you're so far ahead that maybe it really doesn't matter. I'm not quite sure, but it's rare. Failure is a critical part of learning, and it builds resilience and problem-solving skills, and I'd rather build that than know all the facts of Ohio history, personally, even though I would like to know that stuff, not at the expense of their self-esteem, their problem-solving skills, resilience, all this stuff. We need to frame failure as a good thing. It's just a step on the ladder as you move towards actually completing whatever you're after. Time for more coffee. Let's see if this is a cooler one. A little bit better. Moving on, let's talk about learning through real-life experiences. And this is education beyond a classroom, right? Life is the best teacher. That's what I believe. That's what unschoolers believe. That's why we do it this way. Everyday experiences can become valuable learning opportunities. An example is, let's see, I had something the other day where my kids are just asking a bunch of questions. Oh, yeah. So we went to the air show. So we have an air show every Labor Day. If you haven't heard of it, it's one of the premier air shows in the entire United States in Cleveland on Labor Day weekend every year. Every year we get either the Thunderbirds, which is the Air Force, I don't know if they're F-16s, whatever they are, fighter jets, that's all I know, or the Blue Angels, which look very similar, but that's the Navy. Well, the Blue Angels were in town this past weekend, and you could see them doing maneuvers like heading straight up in the air, shooting back down, all this crazy stuff. Super loud, by the way. All this stuff every day, all weekend. My kids were into it. They're watching, going, "Oh my gosh, did you see that? Did you?" And we're, about 5 miles from where they're actually flying, so pretty small. What we did is we took that, just them being outside, happening to see that, and I saw that they were interested. Put on a documentary about the Blue Angels and their training, which is on Amazon Prime if you haven't seen it. I have not seen it, but my kids did. I had to do some work around the house. And then they started asking questions about how these planes could do what they're doing, maybe, and then they started asking questions about the military, and they started asking questions about just a lot of the physics behind it. And we life is the best teacher. It's just something that we observed. They had questions. We started to look into it, which led to more questions. This is what we're looking for. So, thinking about it now, I should probably put on some YouTubes on the physics behind planes, because this is a good opportunity. Anyways, just going through life, it might not be something so one-off. It might just be going to the grocery store and calculating costs, the prices, trying to figure out the best price, make it a math thing, make it a budget thing, make it a just a teaching experience overall. I think those are great opportunities. Also, trips and adventures can become lessons. So what did we do when we saw the Blue Angels? We went down to see them. And we just watched all these planes fly over us. And they flew literally right over our heads. We went downtown to what's called Mall C, which is right downtown Cleveland. And it's a nice green space. I mean, plenty of room. So kids are throwing footballs, playing baseball. And we got these fighter jets literally flying right over our head, which was a cool experience. And we just were learning about even the city, the architecture, because we're sitting downtown. We're talking about the history of Cleveland. We're talking about, of course, airplanes. We're talking about the history of the air show in Cleveland, going back to the air races, which is why we have one of the premier air shows in the country. So pretty cool stuff. I mean, just, do stuff, get out there, talk about it. Everyone's interested. That's what we do as adults. We just tend to focus on things that we're more interested in, and sometimes it's a rejection of the things that they tried to teach us because we got sick of it and said, I don't like that stuff. So we focus on sports. We focus on things that are kind of irrelevant in our life that really don't build us up. Nothing wrong with sports. I watch sports too, but I recognize it's a pastime and it's not where I spend a lot of energy. Anyways, moving on. Oh, more coffee. Oh, it's right at the right temperature. We're hitting we're hitting on all cylinders, guys. Here we go. Curiosity drives learning. Letting kids follow their natural curiosity leads to deep and engaged learning. I think that this is, if you haven't heard this from me before, this is the first time you've listened to my podcast. Kids are curiosity machines. They have questions. So you can't stop your kids from asking questions. It just happens all the time when they're young. That's all they do. Question. And maybe they want to do a couple other things like read a book or something. But I mean, most of the time with me, it's like, Dad, why did you do this? What's going on here? A whole bunch of stuff. Anyways, letting our kids follow their natural curiosity will help them learn faster, retain it better, and learn deeper, like towards mastery. And they'll love the topic. At the very least, they'll like the topic. And they won't hate it, which is, again, what a rigid curriculum does. And we want flexibility to follow your curiosity, just like I like in my adult life. All right, next topic, and more coffee. Trying to make this one just a bit shorter because I actually have a friend in town who came in a little bit early because we have a lunch later at my aunt's, and they invited him as well. So I'm like, hey, get here a little bit early because he was supposed to get there right when it started, and he got here way early. So he's sitting downstairs playing with my kids and the dog, which is very nice of him. But I want to make sure you guys get to hear about this topic because I think it's for someone out there. Someone out there needs to hear this. So I don't want to miss a Monday. All right, preparing your child for real world success. All right. So in relation to the flexibility, right? When you Let me frame it like this. Adaptability is the ultimate skill for the future, right? Change, getting used to change. When I was the educator at the hospital that I worked at, and I had hundreds of respiratory therapists who I would, teach in one way or another. Oftentimes, my teaching had to do with change. And I can tell you that it is not just the minority, it is almost non-existent where people enjoy change. And when I say non-existent, I mean something like maybe 1 out of 10, probably closer to 1 out of 20, who actually enjoy change. Well, probably not even enjoy it, just tolerate change and don't try and fight change to a point, if it's a big enough change. When we're really trying to ramp up something that's maybe a total 180, everybody wants to do the same thing, even though it might not be working, and they just keep on going forward and they fight it. I think adaptability is a meta skill that you can apply everywhere in your life, and it's one of the things that I think is one of the most important things I'm having my kids learn. Traditional schooling prepares kids for predictable situations, but that's not how life works. Flexibility teaches them to adapt, which is critical for life. We've talked numerous times about how the majority of the workforce is either going to be an independent contractor or an entrepreneur in the future. The majority of the U.S. workforce, we're already almost half right now, currently. It's like 40-some%. With technology racing at the pace, outpacing Moore's Law, going into uncharted territory, all we know is the world will look different in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, and it's hard to predict even where we go. We are all going to have to change. Every single one of us in the first world are going to have to change how we do things. Change what we do. Change a lot. The world is changing at a rapid pace, faster than ever before. Those who are going to be able to adapt, they're going to be first to enter, and they're going to be rewarded for that. On top of that, it's going to be less stress if they have this skill built up. I think it's a critical skill. And personally, it's one of the strengths that I've had is being flexible. In fact, I might put flexibility as a value of mine. I don't know. That might be a stretch, but I do pursue it. And I think it's because my highest value, at least that I can see after a lot of reflection, is freedom or liberty. I really like that. And to have freedom and liberty, you really need flexibility. So that way you can make choices. You can't lock yourself into stuff. So I've spent a lot of my life keeping things flexible and committing to things that are important to me. And that's it. Even though I'm not always successful. Coffee break. Here we go. It's good today, guys. Critical thinking and problem solving. So this is, again, in the line of flexibility, preparing children for real world success, critical thinking and problem solving. Flexible learning allows kids to approach challenges from different angles and to think independently. I've already talked a little bit about this one, so I got a little ahead of myself. I won't go too much more into that, but honestly, when we have our kids walking alongside us and we're doing normal life or business stuff, and that's what I try and do also, is get them involved with some of the business end stuff. And not too much at this age, but as time goes on, yes, they learn that life is just a series of problems that you need to figure out, which creates critical thinking, and they get a realistic perspective of what life is. Not, here's Jill, and Jill has this problem in a paragraph form in a textbook, and you need to go over and figure it out. Okay, sure. If I'm choosing between A and B, I'm choosing real world over hypothetical critical thinking any day of the week. I see a place for it, but I mean, if I'm choosing between the two, I always choose real world. Makes it more tangible. It's repeatable. You get models, get a whole bunch of stuff. Anyways. Learning by doing matters more than tests. Imagine that. I think that if we did not have schools, I think that people would look at people crazy who think that testing is going to demonstrate learning better than actually doing the job. But I bet in 2024, there's a lot of people who might disagree with that. And if they don't disagree with me, then why, I might ask, why are you putting kids through a whole bunch of testing that they will never see real world application of those skills in those schools unless it's an exception, because that's not the standard. They'd have to pursue that outside of it. Or you have a fantastic school that tries to give real world application. But that's not the purpose. Remember, we're not doing real world application. Everything's practice for the real world. And I think the best way to learn in the real world is the real world. So there you go. Moving on. Next topic I want to talk about is how letting go of control leads to growth. And this is a message to me because I am really bad at letting go of control. I like to know where all my chess pieces are and the next, 3 moves. That's not how you raise kids. So it's a very big struggle for me. In fact, that's one of the reasons I actually pursued unschooling, is because I have such a hard time letting go or controlling or trying to adhere to something to, meet whatever goal, that I become very, 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 very single focused, blinded by everything else. And I don't want to have that done to my children. So it's more of a little bit of, I'm probably still going to do it to a point. I got to fight my impulses. But I just don't want to do that to my kids. So if I take this approach, we're a little bit better off, I hope. Anyways, one thing that's hard for me to do is trust in the process. So let's talk about that. It's hard to step back and let your kid just do whatever they want, within limits. That's how we do it here. We do what's called intentional unschooling. Go back and listen to that episode where I define that out. But it's hard to step back. But once you trust that your child's natural curiosity can lead, it's amazing. You watch them pick up something in no time whatsoever. Kids spent a year on this. They spent 2 weeks on this, 3 weeks on this. And you're like, oh my gosh. They just learn so much faster. It's amazing. At least that's been my experience. Moving on. Flexibility is not chaos. Let's frame this the right way. It's focused freedom. It gives the ability of your children to test different ways to do things, which looks chaotic at first. Anytime you're trying to figure out something, it looks chaotic. We have to allow this process to happen. We have to let go of control. It's not about lack of structure. It's about adapting to your child's needs and giving them the freedom within boundaries to explore. An example is let's see here, basically allow them to do free play all morning, which, builds creativity according to the literature. It looks chaotic, but they're picking up on stuff just all day long. They're jumping into Legos. They're doing this. They're doing that. They're watching me. They're asking questions. It looks very chaotic, but to them, it's pursuing what interests them. And I think that we need to give them that freedom. We cannot control them. We cannot just sit down and say, you need to do this, and that's just going to make them hate it. That focused freedom, learning how to live in the real world, is a huge advantage. So some actionable tips and maybe some resources. I think I might have some resources in here. Let's see. Start with weekends that might be flexible. If you are not quite an unschooler yet, maybe just try and free up some weekends. Now your kids are probably going to reject all education, because when you force them to do it and they eventually hit some roadblock and you force them, they're going to hate it. So don't be surprised if they don't even want to touch learning. There's a period called deschooling that they have to go through in order to start to find what might actually interest them. But anyways, let your kids lead their learning on the weekends. I mean, they could find something very interesting. In fact, I bet they will, because they're little learning machines. And the younger you do this, the better. Give them the space to explore their interest and see where their curiosity takes them. Take them on everyday activities and make them learning moments, whether you're running errands, cooking, scraping paint off the house. Well, maybe that's not good because there's potential lead in it, but it's just a whole bunch of different things you can do. If you're working on the house, get the kids involved. Not a bad way to teach them. Another, trust in the process, let go of control. Trust that they know how to learn naturally. That's what we were built to do. And this happened, schools have been around for 100 or 150 years. Well, we were able to do quite a bit before that. And I would say that's kind of how we learn, is just letting go and learning, and then finding something that's worth doing. Also connect with like-minded families, so you can join a local or an online group to exchange ideas, maybe get together. That's kind of fun. And celebrate failure as part of learning. Like, hey, we learned this didn't work and we're moving on. Be the model, walk them through it, and just help them use it as a learning experience growing. So with that, I'll end today's episode. So stay curious, stay unschooled, and stay away from the algebra nightmares. I'll catch you in the next episode. So here's where we roll up our sleeves and bring out the big guns. If you support our mission, then please leave a review. On Unschooled Unleashed, we are talking about using a radical approach to education in today's world, and the more 5-star reviews we have, the more people will feel comfortable with the ideas, strategies, and principles we discuss. It gives legitimacy to our message, and the podcast's algorithm prioritizes us so we can reach more people. You may even have your 5-star review read on our podcast. Before I let you go, I have to pause and say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. Your presence here is the fuel that ignites this movement. I am incredibly moved that you trust in us enough to click play. You, my friends, are the caped heroes in this story, the guardians of your family's learning journey, and a beacon of hope for your community. Be bold. Do what you think is best for you and your family. Thanks again for tuning in and taking this courageous leap outside of the box for this educational revolution. Welcome to the front line.